All right. Well, welcome everybody. I am so excited to see that 48 of you decided to come and hang out with us this morning, especially after those great opening sessions, wanting to learn more. Just as a reminder, we are so happy that you are here with us today, but if you want to, there'll be recordings of these sessions so you can go back and check out the ones you missed later. So hopefully you're here to learn about starting and sustaining a DevEd ABE partnership. So we're here today to do some just some sharing with you. There'll be time for questions at the end. I love that then people are introducing themselves and saying good morning in the chat. I am going to be working with you today with my colleague Christy. So I'm Amber Deleger. I am part of Metro North Adult Education, and I have been really honored to be working with Christy and other people at the Anoka Ramsey Community College campuses for almost 6 years now. We're going fast year 5, so it's been pretty great. Christy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Christy Olden-Sonic, and I'm a faculty in the math department at Anoka Ramsey Community College. I've been on the project for about 6 years, and I'm also, our campus has a position called the Developmental Education Liaison, which just kind of means I'm the point person for all things DevEd within the math department.
So I would love for just to you and everybody else here to use this chat to make sure that we are kind of connecting with each other. We are all at different places in this partnership, and I really appreciated how in that beginning session from Patrick, he's my supervisor, so I'll reference him specifically, mentioned that it's always something new and it's always something different. And every time we feel like we have something really figured out, we find out that we don't have it figured out at all and that we have to adjust and change. Riding the bicycle while we build it often. So we're going to share some things with you today that are really going to be mostly about giving you an idea of the things that we've learned, some the hard way, but we want you to know that we are watching the chat really closely. We have a colleague who is a part of our partnership who's also watching the chat. We are hopefully going to dedicate a good amount of time at the end for all those questions that you probably have. We do want to encourage you as you're listening. I know we didn't get a good big break between the other session, but if you come up with a question, write it down so that we can make sure we grab that. And we'll also be giving you our contact information. Christy and I have an open door policy, so we always encourage people, if you have questions, to reach out to us, or if you want to watch some of the shenanigans Christy and I teach together 5 days a week, so it's always interesting. So know that we are very open about sharing what we have done. So our goals today are, we're going to give you a brief overview of our partnership, and we have given lots of sessions about our partnership, and every single time we talk about it, there's always more and new and different. So we're going to be really brief, kind of introducing what our partnership is. And then we're going to give you some pointers and hopefully some good takeaways that you can bring back to your programs as you're looking at starting or evolving your work. So we're going to talk about how to maybe get started and things you should think about, settling into your partnership and how things are working as you're going, growing and evolving your partnership so that you're not, like, our students' needs are constantly evolving and changing. So making sure that you are making sure you're doing that work along with them. Some things we've learned from some of the wonderful successes we've had, and then maybe some of the things that weren't so great. And then time for your questions.
All right. So I'm going to talk just very briefly kind of about our general partnership. So I'm faculty at Anoka Ramsey Community College, and we do have 2 campuses. So we have the Rapids campus and Cambridge campus. And because we have those 2 campuses, there are actually 2 ABE cohorts that support each. So Metro North Adult Education supports the Rapids campus, and the Central Minnesota East ABE supports and partners with our Cambridge campus. And we do have, we've been at this for 6 years. We've got a pretty good established partnership. And with that, it has really kind of become that, like, it gets meshed, right, and kind of mushy, and exactly how many departments are there. So for example, we say that the North Central ABE is with Cambridge, but not really, because some of like our online courses are taught by Rapids faculty, and then some Rapids faculty are, so it really becomes just kind of, we have separate departments, but we're really all one big department at the same time, if that makes sense. So with that, we all attend department meetings. There, everyone's on the mass emails and all of that. ABE does have offices on both campuses. And ABE also works with, so because we have two campuses, we have two different tutoring centers. ABE works with all of those as well. We also have a lot of different instructional models. So we do have some ABE taught courses on our campuses. So students register through the Anoka Ramsey website. It's just like they register for all their other, their English classes, their sociology classes, all of that. They register with, the only real true difference is that ABE teaches those courses as opposed to a faculty member teaching those courses. So we have that model. We also kind of have the flip to that, which are classes that faculty teach solo. We have co-taught courses, so courses where we both teach simultaneously. And then we also have courses that are taught by faculty but supported by ABE. I will certainly say this is not where we started, right? We grew sometimes organically and very simply, sometimes very painfully, but we kind of grew to get to this point. And as seems to be the theme of the morning, it's with kind of adjusting to meet students' needs, deciding what works, what doesn't work, throw COVID in there, and how are we going to respond to that? And so we've really come to this very robust, kind of varied model for our instructional models.
And we really do enjoy working together. So over the course of our presentation, you're going to see pictures of some of the different ways that we've partnered. And it's just us really liking each other. So it's fun to be able to say that we started out feeling really unsure about how we could work together and if we were trying to steal each other's jobs and what were we going to do. And over the course of only 5 years, we are now a fully embedded like family, and it's kind of great. So like Christy said, we have a lot of different partnerships. We've tried lots of different models. And so thinking about the fact that you might have a lot of different models that you want to approach, or you don't know what kind of models you want, we're going to talk about how do you get started. So let's just be excited. You have a potential partner, you have some ideas, you have some students that you can serve. That's awesome. And it's exciting. But this is where the hardest work comes into play. And we want to make sure that we kind of highlight that had we known what we know now, we would have started a little differently, but there was just no way for us to know all of the really important foundational pieces that we would need. And so hopefully we're able to share some of these with you as you're getting started. I do see in the chat, our partnership, Christy and I teach math. So we're going to focus mostly of our stuff talking about math partnerships, but we've had partnerships with other departments as well, but our most robust partnership is with math at this time. But that's growing and evolving and changing. We've done the most risk taking with our math partnership. So, but this hopefully will be transferable to other content areas as well. So things we want you to know that maybe you wouldn't think about, but maybe are things that you should consider as you're getting started is, what's the need? Why are you partnering? And that is really important, because keeping that why are we doing this is really helpful as you're measuring your success, but also as refocusing, especially when things get hard, like a random pandemic shows up, or there's new mandates coming down the pipeline, or you're worried about student retention, all these different things. Having that purpose really keeps you directed. We also really encourage you to take a step back and look at the talents that you're bringing in. One of our challenges was that we had to overcome some previously, like long before we were involved, but some negative relationships with between our organizations, where there was this idea that ABE was holding on to students too long and wasn't preparing them for college, or that college was trying to take students from ABE, or that we were trying to do each other's job and there wasn't space for both of us. And I am here to tell you that we have learned that both organizations offer a really important skill set for these students. And so taking time to look at what are the talents of the people in your partnership and how you can leverage those is absolutely key. So I am a numeracy teacher by trade. I love math. I love everything about math. And so I came into my partnership thinking I was going to have to be like the world's best math teacher. And then what we ended up finding out is that actually I have a lot of experience and training with math anxiety, but I also have a lot of training with study skills and technology and some of these other things that as an ABE teacher, I have to meet for my students' needs that maybe isn't a normal priority for the math classroom. And so once I realized I actually bring a really cool thing to the table by bringing in these soft skills experiences and this andragogy experience by teaching them, and I can let Christy really shine as this math expert that she is, we realized that we complemented each other way more than conflicted on what our roles are. Funding is always something, and you've heard that come up a lot already today. That's something that we run into because all of a sudden there's a need, and then how do we grow and how are we going to be sustainable in what we're doing? It can't just be little grants or little pockets of money you're getting from here or there. How are you going to make that work? And then also, how does each organization's funding model work? Because what we've learned is that the ABE funding cycle, like the fiscal year for the ABE program, is really different than Min-State. And how do we balance those as we're making decisions? Which goes into that next point of really understanding your programs. We need to have a really deep understanding. And what we learned is that the more we know about how each other's organization works or is funded, or their goals or the other things, the easier it is for us to make decisions about programmatic offerings, instructor positions, all these other things. The more we understand, the less conflict we get into. Other things we want you to know that are really important to think about as you're getting started is how are you going to communicate? Communication is absolutely key. And it's one of the things that we advocate for the most as we're getting started is how are you going to talk about information? How are you going to share it? So our program has a lot of partners. Christy told you we've got 2 ABE programs. We've got, oh gosh, a lot of teachers and deans and other people and all these different stakeholders involved, and trying to keep everybody informed of what's going on, but then also having a system to communicate really carefully about what are our needs. So I am really lucky that my college faculty have become really huge advocates for me and help me connect with the college system. So if I need a piece of technology to do something and the college has it, my college partners can help me access that. Or if my college faculty is saying, hey, I really need somebody to help with this kind of job, I'm able to take that information and bring that to like my supervisor. But we are learning that it's really important to also have direct lines of communication. So who are we going to talk to if there is a challenge or a problem? Humans working together doing really hard emotional work, there's going to be conflict. How do you handle that? Not everybody is perfectly matched. I have had, just as much as anybody else, a lot of different partners that I've worked with, and each person brings the different needs to the table. So having somebody that you can talk to when challenges arrive, but then also somebody who you can share your successes with. So communication needs to be really open and clear, and there needs to be an understanding of maybe who you're going to talk to for what stuff goes to everybody, and those kind of things. As a person who felt like an outsider coming in, I was the only ABE person in the math department for a really long time, and I wasn't sure what I was doing. The idea of department support is really, really important. My job fundamentally changed at the college when my college partnerships advocated for me to start attending department meetings. And I got to get on the agenda and I started getting action items, and my expertise was brought in, not seen any differently than the other people in the math department. And that made my job so much better, but it also opened up so many possibilities. And so now I feel like I identify as a part of the math department, um, which has really shifted not only how I see myself, but how my partners engage with me, but also how my students engage with me. That has been the most beautiful thing, and getting that idea of like making sure the department is on board for adding somebody new in, or adding new people in, or adding new elements in. I'm really blessed to work with the math department at ARCC. Two other points I wanted to make before we move on about getting started is, how are you going to prioritize collaboration? So collaboration is time where you are talking with the person you are teaching with. And maybe it's also time where you are talking to other people doing similar work as yourself. So I have collaboration with Christy. We teach together 5 days a week. We get time dedicated to talk to each other about how our students are doing, what planning is going to look like for the week. What do we need to do? Is there any kind of student meetings we need to do? And that is protected and compensated time. I also have collaboration time with my other ABE colleagues, kind of like a PLC, but not exactly. And that is really important. It is really hard to get that time funded and protected, but I can tell you, when we've had that time protected, where it's on the calendar and it counts, even though it's not student contact time, it is absolutely important in doing the work that we need to do. When we have that time compensated and protected, our product is better. We are serving the students better. Our partnership is better. And when we're just trying to sneak it in, when that time isn't compensated or isn't protected, our product definitely suffers. We are obviously great educators, and we donate a lot of our time and energy and resources, but we've had to deal with both models as funding has kind of ebbed and flowed over the years. And I would tell you, one of my biggest things that I would advocate is that you need collaboration time on your schedule, protected, and not something that you add in accidentally. So you need to think about, how are you going to plan for that? And finally, the last thing I really wanted to highlight here is, we cannot do our job in a silo. So how are you going to engage advisors and placement and other stakeholders on your campuses and in your ABE programs to know and understand what you're doing? You are going to need people to refer students to your program, to understand what you're doing. Why are they going to pick a class that has 2 teachers and has to fill out extra paperwork and has to do all these things? The more we can engage in our stakeholders, the better we can do. So I will say that really thinking about who needs to have a good understanding of what your program is to help students understand what they're getting into. So these are just really brief things that we've learned along the way, of things that you should know as you're getting started, things that you might not normally think about as you're planning. So once you've gotten started, you have to settle in and find that balance. So Christy, what should we do as we're settling into a partnership?
Well, for starters, you should always dress up as your co-teacher for Halloween.
Always, it's a requirement.
Always dress up as your co-teacher for Halloween. But right, love that. Plus, let's just stop and acknowledge that Amber's short. All of these pictures.
I can't help it, but I did get partnered with another person under 5 foot tall this semester, and it is life-changing. I love it.
So as we settle in to these partnerships, it's kind of that continuous improvement kind of mentality. You figure out what works, you figure out what doesn't, and then we move on. So on our next slide, Amber, can you jump?
Sorry, I was chatting. There you go.
Okay. So we really do kind of each semester look and say, well, what has worked, what has not, how have needs changed, etc. So looking at that kind of first slide, really trying to evaluate the effectiveness going back to that goal that you had originally set, to try to figure out how we might, like what has worked, what has not, especially with like a pandemic. How are we going to do this remotely? How are we doing it? Like when we come back to face, are we all face to face? How can we adjust those needs accordingly? Looking at data is always a great use of time. We have in fact done this. We've looked at data and recognized that some of our classes don't adequately prepare our students for this particular next level class. When they take this class, they're doing poorly, but when they take these classes, they're doing well. How can we adjust? Is a huge piece that you'd like to look through. Make sure, again, pulling it back to that focus goal. Do we need to adjust that goal given the data we've had? Where are we succeeding? Where are we not? As you settle in, it's important that you communicate the roles of all the different teachers to the students, both in what distinctions do they just inherently make, but also what distinctions are necessary and which ones are in fact beneficial. So an example of this, so Amber and I teach together. Turns out that when it comes to late work, I'm a big old softie, and Amber will just straight up, nope, that was due, you didn't turn it in. So we've adapted the policy of all accept assignments on time. If it's late, you have to convince Amber that you should let her take that. So Amber is the collector of assignments, right? So my students simply know this, and I will just say, you know, they'll come to hand me something. I say, you're gonna have to give that to Amber, right? And this is, and there are places where we switch that, where, you know, maybe I'm a little, I handle this situation a little better, so I'll do that one. Amber handles this better, so she'll do that one. We have generally found that students learn it pretty quick. Even if we don't, you know, articulate it clearly at the beginning, they will learn, oh, like I have this kind of question, so I'm going to go talk to Amber. We have a professional tutor, Joan. I'm going to go talk to Christy. But sometimes it's very helpful at the beginning of a class to really articulate that clearly to the students. For the most part, they just kind of figure it out as we go. On a side note, to faculty out there, in general, I find that my students like Amber better than me. They kind of
differently, Christy. It's different.
differently. They kind of view me as the arbiter of their grade, right? That I'm like this person who's making them do all this hard math. And Amber gets to be the success coach, right? She gets to just cheer them on and tell them all the great things they're doing and build them up. And I have simply made my peace with that. Like if these are the roles that we take so that my students can be successful, sweet. Amber tells me what they tell her anyway. But there is, and that's not exclusively true. I would say different students with different personalities will kind of tend towards one of us or the other, and we're simply okay with that. A big thing that we do, and that is also encompassed in that protected collaboration time, is student use of resources. So are the students going to the tutoring center? Are they getting the help they need? If there are any students who have accommodations, are they using them effectively? If, you know, there's this assignment, but nobody's doing it, how are homework scores? Things like that is a huge piece of that collaboration time where we can brainstorm ideas of, okay, the students are, you know, behind on this. How are we going to get them to come see a tutor about that? Test corrections are due. How are we going to get them to take this seriously and to kind of work on these? When they need to talk to an advisor, how are we going to get the students to visit their advisors when their lives are busy. So, and that's a huge piece of that protected collaboration time. We have to be really intentional about getting students to use the resources that are available to them. Expertise outside the classroom. There are always going to be issues. There's going to be factors outside anybody's control, and moving kind of as you settle into this partnership and things are kind of moving along. How are we going to adjust? How are we going to share with the people that we need to talk with and get, make the best success possible for our students? So that last one, the collaboration time, and we've touched on this quite a bit because I think it's hugely important. And I think a large part of the reason that our partnership is working well and has grown so much is that we very much had the support of our administration. And I mean that both that like our dean believed in the work we were doing, but also supported it. So I'm the developmental education liaison, and I have release time to do that. I'm paid solely to see how these things are working, to facilitate the meetings, to collaborate with Amber. I'm actually paid separately for that. So I have release time just to co-teach with Amber, just to meet with her, to work on all of that. And then I'm also in charge of all the partnerships, right? So I facilitate meetings, I introduce people, I reach out, how's it going? But so it's heavily supported by our administration. And I think that's important for a couple of reasons. Number one, I am supported at the level of reducing my course load. So I don't have to teach a class so that I can take that time to work on the collaboration, both with my co-teachers, with my ABE supports, but also with the departments as a whole. There's a lot of moving parts with this many different departments, all trying to act as one department. And I spend a good part of my week doing that. The other aspect, especially of release time, is that if it's compensated, you can then require it. Right? So it opens up the time required. But it also says, if you're going to teach this class, this is an expectation. And so very clearly, like, you're gonna have to do this. And honestly, it's super fun. We usually sit there and eat lunch, and but that designated collaboration time gives us that opportunity to discuss things like, Chrissy, you're a big old softy, you're taking too many late assignments. And okay, so how are we going to adjust that? So it's kind of that overarching, like, a level of comfort where we can say, what is your strength? What is my strength? How are we going to move forward? Also, that collaboration time is really important on an individual student basis. We do things like, hey, so-and-so grabbed me in the hall after class. They've got a crisis going on. How are we going to adjust? And so that collaboration piece is really, 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 really probably the most important thing we do, in my opinion.
I would agree. And it's also a really important time for us that we can do things. One of our big goals as we're working on our diversity and equity goals is to make sure we're doing a lot of just-in-time instruction, or looking at doing tiered interventions, or trying to really shift our instructional models. Christy and I are doing a lot of work where we're doing more student-led and student inquiry work. And so that collaboration time is really important for that creativity to happen as well. We don't get a lot of together planning time. And so when we have our collaboration time after we talk about student needs, that's when we get to be fun and creative and talk about, okay, we're doing slopes. So, okay, do we have rulers? Okay, we have rulers. Okay, now we're going to make sure we get let's plan an activity where students are measuring stairs and talking about risers and runners. And that's when we get to do that really fun part of teaching where we get away from sage on the stage where it's we don't need Christy and I talking, and that collaboration time is where we come up with so many of our great ideas and we get to work on them. So if Christy and I are trying to come up with um a new activity, we get to have that time and collaboration time to work together on it, which is where I think a lot of our really fun stuff comes from, which is
Mhm.
where also some of that life-giving stuff comes out of as well. So you have a partnership, you've kind of established it, you've got your footing underneath you. Maybe you are making tape diagrams and having coffee a palooza with Capri Suns with your students. This is a great model of our partnership. We've got me as an ABE teacher, we've got a college faculty member, and then we have a professional tutor. The three of us are leading a study group together, and we are trying to make it fun. So we were dressed like it was a cafe. So we were having cafe time in the classroom. That's something that came out of our collaboration time. So you want to grow your partnership, which is really important. So growing your partnership is really important, because it's something that you'll see a needle come up and then you'll try to be really responsive, and but ends up a lot of the times our changes have been reactionary to something that's happening and we have to respond to it really fast. But thinking about growing your partnership comes in lots of different ways, and we didn't really think about what was going to happen when, okay, how are we going to hire 3 more full-time ABE teachers to handle supporting all of these students? Like, that was not on our radar when we started this project. And my lovely supervisor had to be like, I love that you want this, but I don't know how to find 5 more full-time ABE teachers right now. And so if you know any ABE teachers who want full-time work, good Lord, need help. But things to think about. Growing your partnership can look in lots of different ways. So one of the ways that it looks different is bringing in new partners. One of our biggest concerns from our stakeholders when we started this project was that it was the Amber effect. I came in as the state numeracy coordinator and the representative for our region as the adult numeracy rep. So I come in with a lot of background knowledge in teaching numeracy to adults. Um, I happen to be a teacher of the year semifinalist in the process of this. So people thought, well, it's because of Amber, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. And we had to say, no, it's because we have great bones and we have great structure and we have great students and we have great leadership, that this works. So how are you going to support bringing in new faculty? When we started, I taught with the same co-teacher for years, and then he went on sabbatical, and I thought my heart was going to break and I was going to die because I didn't know what I was going to do. But bringing in new faculty brings in new life and new excitement. And faculty go on sabbatical a lot, it feels like. So there's always somebody new coming in. So how are you going to onboard them? Or as you bring in a new ABE teacher, how are you going to bring them in? Or if you're bringing in a new dean and they have to understand, being able to articulate what your partnership is can be really hard. So thinking about how are you going to bring in new people so that they can get caught up to speed and feel supported and feel like they have a place at the table. So thinking about what are you going to do to onboard new people, and how are you going to share your story in a way that onboards new people? That has been one of our biggest challenges, if I'm really honest, because we don't have a really strong mentorship experience. And so luckily we are small, but mighty, and so we've been able to kind of support each other as we've gone, but now we've got more teachers at the Cambridge campus and we've got all these other people. And so as you're looking at growing your partnership, you might want to have somebody like a Christy who's in charge of helping onboard those new people. Christy sends weekly emails of like, hey, something you might not think about as you're doing this when you're working. Everybody in our department seems to be having a test this week. So, hey, it's testing week. So make sure you're reminding students to use ABE study halls or going to the tutoring center or whatever. And so that's really important as you're kind of onboarding new people. And when you're bringing in things, I've seen in the chat already about, don't forget when you're planning your new schedule, you need to make sure you add in 2 TABE testing days and the time for them to get their your learner entry form for the ABE program, because the college faculty don't know that they need to do that. And we can't do our job without that. So things that they wouldn't know that they don't know. Those are things that we've learned because we've like ran into it and had to try to figure it out. How are you going to support each other outside of the classroom is also really important for growing your partnership. One of the things that Christy and I are really involved in right now is that ABE is really involved in the college campus. We will go to like new student nights, and we'll table, and we'll go to department meetings, and we'll present at each other's conferences and things like that. And so now we're looking at how do we bring that same kind of excitement back to the ABE program. So Christy and I are talking about how do we bring in like having a college faculty person come into a GED or adult diploma class one night and say, hey, you're thinking about going to college. How are we going to make sure you're ready for it? Or, hey, I'm going to come teach you a math lesson like you might see when you get to college. How can we do that? Or bringing in advisors or counselors from the college into the ABE site so that our students have a really supported handoff. And also then if a college student needs support, then they aren't seeing ABE as a step down or as a demotion, that we're kind of saying like, you are going to be loved and taken care of as we hand you off from one program to the other to get you where you go. And that's something that's really important, is that we are trying to make sure that it is not a one way, but that we are mutually supporting each other. And I will say it's been really great. So my ABE colleagues might notice Christy or Bruce or some of these other people in the room who have come and presented at our conference. And I have been invited to go present at conferences for theirs, which has been really important as we are showing that we're a united front. And then finally, things to think about are how do you stay on top of those mandates? We heard the 2026 mandate, we've heard changes in fundings and looking at proxy hours and all of those things. So thinking about how can you be ready as those things come along. So Christy, we've got about 10 minutes left. So I think we should look at some of our challenges and opportunities and then get to some questions.
Sounds great. So I'll do these fast. So we have had some challenges, some opportunities. I won't read them all, but you know, the having different systems, different departments can be a challenge. We work it out. We schedule our classes and our staff very differently. Open communication is really really important there. And I did see in the chat there's that administrative support for the collaboration time for all that we do. It's hard to get, and it was a challenge. And honestly, we had to just say, then fine, we won't do it. And then we just didn't for a bit. Because it's a tremendous amount of work. And so we did have a kind of a start where we weren't doing it as well. Because we were burning out. Which leads to another challenge that actually isn't up there. Especially from the faculty perspective, we are getting to the point where we're having to be careful not to burn out our ABE partners. That because our structures are very different, right? How much is too much? From kind of both, because our structures are so different in the way we kind of view classes and view our schedules. But again, an open and honest conversation is usually where the good stuff happens there. Another real challenge that we have is clearly articulating the benefits of exactly what we're doing, because it's very difficult to measure. But so kind of articulating, and again, that goes into that funding piece. It's working, but it's difficult to describe exactly what it is and how it's working. Especially if you're a math person and like you like numbers more than words. Yeah, we struggle. And And then of course there's the mess of COVID and what that means, and how we did during the pandemic, but also after. Our students are quite different after the pandemic than they were before. We're finding that kind of across the board in all of our classes. How do we react? So I went through that super duper quick because I want to make sure that we leave some time for questions if you have any.
Yes, and just as a reminder, these are I'm leaving the slide up for just one more second. We don't have it all figured out. We don't always feel super confident. Christy and I yesterday had a moment where we were almost both in tears trying to figure out how to work on a student problem together and having to figure out how to navigate a really complicated system to get students what they need. So these are our current struggles. So these are things that we would love to be able to work with more people on. Sometimes we feel a little isolated, or sometimes we feel like we don't know what we're doing. So know that as you're doing this work, there will be things that you don't know, and you're trying to figure them out. And so even 5 years in, these are things that we are really working hard to do. So we have we have several minutes left of our session, and we've been getting some great questions in the chat, and I want to highlight some of the ones. Please, you can drop a question in the chat. We'd love to see it. I just want to highlight for those of you that might not be watching, looking at the chat, or you are checking us out on a recording. Hey, recording people, some things that have been coming up. So in ABE, we are required to have TABE testing. So TABE testing is the standardized testing that helps us get our funding. And we have to have that to be able to do our job, how our funding model works. And so it has been a thing that we've learned that we have to have that in the schedule, in the syllabus, like we need to be included right away. And so we make it a mandatory assignment. And then we've been trying to use some of the TABE online things so that we can get some diagnostic tools from that test so that it's not just another loophole. We have had some struggles with students who are really uninterested in trying to fill out another entry form for the ABE program, because it feels like it's a bait and switch, or it's a you're lying to me. That's not what I wasn't hoping for. I didn't want it to be in an ABE class because they might think it's a bad thing or things like that. And so having it just built into the syllabus, and then my teachers that I work with will just give you like a point of like a point or two for doing the task, and that seems to make the difference. I'm trying to see other questions. Please make sure you drop them in the chat. How do we know if a student can be in one of our programs? So we are ABE at our Anoka Ramsey site is embedded in some way, shape, or form in all of the Dev Ed math classes, since we're talking about math. So we're there. And the only people that we can't technically service are PSEO students, since they're currently enrolled in a high school, so they can't be with us. But we will take care of them anyways. We don't ignore them. We just can't get compensated for their time. So that's something that happens. My college partners also, for looking at how do you partner well, there are a number of programs that you can use, like My Open Math or My Math Lab, that can really, you're using for like homework or things like that. ABE can get proxy hours or seat time for those programs. And so my partners have been amazing, working really hard to embed things that ABE can get proxy hours for as a part of the class. And that makes our job way easier. So we support a lot of that as well. There's a great question. Christy, would you like to just briefly talk about how a student would move through our DevEd? So we start with 80, and then what is our lowest level and how does that move up until they're college ready?
Yeah, so right now, and of course this is changing with mandates and such, but so right now we have an math 0080, and that's the lowest level math class we have, and that is taught strictly by ABE. So the students register, it's a class like any other Anoka Ramsey class. It's on the schedule. They register. but it's free. So they, but beyond that, it's, it's scheduled in a class, actually in the same classroom as most of our other classes, very, very similar to one of our classes, just taught by ABE and thus free instead of taught by faculty. The next level is actually the class that Amber and I are teaching together this semester, is our 0230 class, which is a 4-credit class. It's confusing because the student pays for 5 credits, but they meet 7 hours a week. Ironically, students almost never notice that. They're just kind of okay. So they take that, and so that is our co-taught course that Amber and I are teaching together this semester. And then after that class, it kind of splits depending on if they're STEM or non-STEM, like what their major is. And there's a combination of developmental and college level after that. We're almost at all of the developmental courses being supported by ABE. Our demand for ABE staff is too high. We don't have enough ABE. So not quite everybody who wanted ABE support got it, but we're close. So then most of our developmental courses are ABE supported. And this is actually one area where we're growing. Maybe summer and into fall, we're going to start looking at how could ABE support some of those college level courses, and what is that going to look like.
And then we have, we're ending our time right now, but we want you to know that as we're looking at the CORECs, Christy and I are working as a part of a team that we're looking at how does ABE or how can ABE support COREC models and some of the other things I see in the chat for the English support, the technology support, the reading and writing support. What would that look like? So we are so sad if we didn't get to, I think we got to most of the questions. Christy and I, please message us. You're always welcome to pop in and see what we're doing. Please contact us in any way if you have questions about what this looks like or what it could look like. Gail is wonderful and putting links in the chat for your next session. Your next session, I believe, starts at the 30. So we want to make sure that you are able to get there. Please stand up, move your body around, get a beverage, look at something that is not technology for 20 seconds for your brain. We are so honored to have been with you this morning. We hope that you are able to reach out to us again soon and enjoy the rest of your symposium.